maze. So it is summer. That is definitely for sure where I am. It is way too hot, way too humid, and there are too many mosquitoes. So I decided it would be fun to do summer book club. So I thought over the next couple of weeks, I'd share with you some of the books that I'm reading this summer that are, some of them are old friends, some of them are new, that I think are helpful for people who are separating and divorcing, for people who are trying to co-parent as a separated family, and for people who are dealing with conflict resolution or trying to find ways to resolve conflict in their lives. So the first book I wanted to start with is a little bit, it's interesting. So it's called BIFF, for co-parent communication. So BIFF, B-I-F-F, definitely means something colloquially in Australia, to biff somebody, to punch them. But I encountered it with Bill Eddy at Pepperdine. So Bill Eddy, who has worked for many, many years as a lawyer, a mediator, and a social worker to work with people in conflict, has dedicated his life really to understanding how high conflict personalities and people with high conflict traits function in conflict and how to maximize the chances of finding resolution. So when I was a student at Pepperdine, Bill had a book out, which I think is actually at home, called BIFF, which stands for brief, informative, friendly, firm. But essentially, it is to deal with that thing that I think we all experience. You are in a conversation and somebody says something that you find very triggering, very difficult to listen to. And our instinct is often to strike back, to feel as if we're being attacked, and maybe you are being attacked, but to hit back. And the challenge is that that response can then provoke further attacks. And so one of the things that Bill Eddy talks about is if you are in a conflict with a high conflict personality, it won't help. That type of defensive reaction will actually only increase their need, their interest in extending the conflict, in broadening the conflict, in intensifying the conflict. And so he talked about if you do receive a comment or you're in a conversation, I find it really helpful with email, because I think particularly tone in email is very difficult to establish, and that sometimes people can write things which they think are clear, but when you read them, you've got a different interpretation. And so I think there's rarely a day goes by when I don't use the BIFF principles. And what the idea is that if you receive an email that you feel triggered by, that you feel is an attack, that you first of all take a breath and decide to respond with BIFF. So instead of writing back to pages and pages of an email, or if somebody's been speaking for 5 minutes explaining all of the terrible ways that you've behaved, you don't respond in kind. You don't go back with pages and pages of detail. You don't spend 10 minutes explaining how they're the worst parent in the world. You keep it brief. You make it informative, so it's factual. So instead of all of the, well, you've never cared about, little Billy's teeth, and no wonder little Billy has to get braces because your family and your need to give him sugary drinks, etc., etc. You just go back with Billy needs to see the dentist Thursday, 3 p.m. That's the appointment. So you keep it informative. You keep it as friendly as possible, or at least not hostile, which is hard. That if you are being attacked, then it feels very difficult to go back in a way that is moderate. It's hard, I know that, but it's helpful. So friendly and firm, that you don't go back and sort of open the door to continuing debating things. You're clear. These are the boundaries. This is what's happening. And one of the things that he talks about in BIFF in general is it's really hard to do that because you don't want to be friendly. You don't want to be informative. You don't want to be brief. You want to justify. This is why I've done this. You want to explain. No, you don't understand. This is what's actually happening. And you want to tell them how they're wrong. The challenge is none of that helps. Yeah, it's no one is going to read that email and think, oh, that's right. I am really unreasonable. It doesn't work like that. And so BIFF is a great tool. I mean, I really think one of the best communication tools I've ever learned about how to de-escalate conflict, how to try and take some of the heat, some of the intensity out of communications. And what I love is that beyond just BIFF in normal life, Bill Eddy has now worked on BIFF for co-parents. And definitely, as I think anyone who is a parent or works with parents will know, there is a huge range of opportunities for conflict, even amongst intact families, and particularly when people separate and their different beliefs and values around child rearing kind of rear their head. What I love about this book is he actually uses real life examples. So he talks about, for example, BIFFs for social media, BIFFs for changes to schedules, BIFFs for finances, BIFFs for activities, BIFFs for healthcare, BIFFs for education. I think what I love is there's lots of practical examples. So it's not a theoretical book, it's actually a practical book. Beyond BIFF, Bill has now added 3 additional components to check a message before you send it back out. And those 3 are what he calls the 3 A's. So one is check your message. Is there advice? So have you tried to give advice to the other person? The reason why he's saying don't include advice is if it's not solicited, it won't be welcome. And even if it is solicited, it can be difficult. That if you are in a separated family, getting advice from the other parent may be the last thing that you want. So check whether you've got advice. Check if there's an admonishment, i.e., are you blaming them? Think about it. So even if it's mild, if somebody is very sensitive or is reading that email, they're going to probably expand how they feel about it. So is there an admonishment? And the last one is going to sound strange, I think, because I know that I've talked about apologies. Is there an apology? Don't apologize. The reason is if you are dealing with somebody who is high conflict, apologizing doesn't assuage how they feel. It often empowers them to feel that they need to, oh, you do realize it's all your fault. Now I need to come on the attack more. The whole goal about BIFF and BIFF for co-parenting is reduce conflict, de-escalate, reduce intensity. Yeah, find a working system to move forward. That this is about communication as opposed to this is about continuing the argument. So my first summer book is going to be BIFF for co-parenting communication. I think Bill Eddy, if you are interested, I'm going to put a link below to his High Conflict Institute. He has training courses. He also has a lot of great short articles about different aspects of dealing with conflict. And he definitely has a very specific perspective, which I think is helpful. And that definitely, even if you're not dealing with somebody who's high conflict, biffing your emails, biffing your texts is a really helpful tool. It just makes communication easier. So welcome to the first book of the summer, BIFF, by Bill Eddy. And I hope you have a good week. Take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. you.